Nancy Bergman and
Mary C. Anderson.
we're here for
History
Files. This is going to be our Halloween edition.
I know, Nancy, and I was so excited. I wanted to do this tour in the dark of night, but unfortunately, we don't have the camera equipment to do that.
No, we don't have that night vision, the infrared. I'm sorry. But recently we did a trip up to Tyson Ridge.
Yes, and that has a long history.
And when I told people about it, they all said, oh, you must have been going up there looking for Lavender Lily.
Yes, Lavender Lily is a long-held, maybe not necessarily like a story, but there's actually a little bit of history, isn't there?
It's a legend.
It's a legend.
So this is going to be our Halloween program. We are going to go back up out of Trempealeau County into Buffalo County. Yes, and then we're going to go back up on the ridge, and we're going to look for Lavender Lily.
That sounds like a plan, because it's rumored that this is the time of the year that she will come out in the dark of night and wander the hills,
wander the ridge.
Montana
Yeah,
Ridge.
that's right. So we're going to go look for Lavender Lily. You ready?
Let's go on a road trip.
All right, Mary, we have crossed the line. We have crossed out of Trempealeau County, and we have entered Buffalo County. And like I say, this is pretty good. Nobody has stopped us and asked for our papers yet.
That's a good thing, because I don't think I have my papers with me,
No,
Nancy.
I know. They probably would turn us around at the border and tell us to go back again.
That's right.
So we are going up I guess it would be the Buffalo County end of Travis Valley. And a little sidebar here. I'm calling it Travis Valley because in a book that a guy wrote about Trempealeau County before the 1900s, he said that Travis Valley was named for a Doc Travis, who was kind of an herbalist, according to this guy, and his name was Travis. But over the years, it's become Traverse Valley or Travers Valley, and that's easy to see how that name would morph, although I think the real name should probably be Travis, but you know, who cares?
Well, I was told as a little girl that it was Traverse Valley, because this is how you got down into Wamandee.
You traversed it.
You had to traverse the valley in the ridge. So I don't know.
Well, it makes sense. Either way, it works. And people.
This would have been quite a trip with a horse.
Oh gosh, yes. And I got to tell you, Mary, that I spent a couple of days trying to find out about Lavender Lily. And I Googled and Googled until my fingers were bleeding. I mean, I was all over the internet. And I never found any real, definitive story about Lavender Lily. All I found were different stories, and it definitely is what you would have to call a legend. I suppose if this was occurring in a city, you could call it an urban legend, but we'll have to call it a country legend, I guess.
Well, in sharing some of our conversation, I often wondered if her last name was Lily. Were there lilies in the area?
Not up here. I mean, there's Lilas down by Dodge, but
that's a little far stretch from Montana Ridge.
It is. That's quite a ways away. So it's just a story that's got a lot of legs. Let's put it that way. And if you go around the whole country, not just this county, if you go around the United States, this legend with almost the same identical story, but usually a different name, different place, pops up in all kinds of different places. There's even a story like this in Chicago. So it's really interesting.
Are they all called Lavender Lily, or are
No.
they just like, maybe Carrot Top Carolyn or somebody like that?
No, as far as I can find, it seems to be around here is the only place that they call it Lavender Lily. Now, of course, like I say, it was hard to find any definitive information on any of the websites that I looked at on the internet. And there's just all kinds of different stories, and there's a lot of conflicting information. So our viewers are just going to have to take this into consideration, that this is a story, this is a legend, and who knows?
Well, and you never know. Some of the folks in the viewing audience may actually have their own encounter
Well, that's true.
that they could potentially share either with us on the TCC TV webpage, or maybe with their family members, to keep Lavender Lily's story more up to date for the 21st century.
Well, that's good information. That's good idea. So we're going to stop here. First, we're going to stop at the Catholic Cemetery. And Mary and I were up here before when we were looking around on Tyson Ridge. And this is the German Catholic Cemetery. It is owned right now by St. Peter and Paul Church. And I assumed one source said this was a missionary church built here from St. Peter and Paul, but another source said no, this was a missionary church of St. Boniface in Wamandee. So who knows? Also, it said on the web that the cemetery records for this church have been lost, but then somebody else said no, they aren't. So again, there's just all this conflicting information. But the reason we're going to stop here is because when I was looking on the internet for this, there was a picture that they used, and it was a tombstone kind of here in this cemetery. So let's go look at that one because it's really unique. Now the pictures on the internet, when they talk about Lavender Lily here on Montana Ridge, Tyson Ridge, there is a picture that they show, and it is a picture of this particular tombstone. And this is a really unique, it's not really a tombstone. It seems to be made out of some kind of metal. But this is the one that they show, and they usually show it with a jacket hanging on it. But I can't find it, if you come over here and look at the name on it. This is for a lady by the name of Apollonia Fagan, who was born in 1855 and died in, it looks like, 1883. So this is not a recent burial. But I don't know why. This is what they always show, this particular monument. If you go on the internet and Google about Lavender Lily on Montana Ridge. So I guess the thing now is to tell you what I did find out about what is the basic story. The basic story is, and there's no timeline, we don't really know when this was supposed to have happened. Two boys, or in some cases one boy, are out driving in the evening up here on Montana Ridge. And we don't know if they're driving a horse and buggy or in a car, but as they're driving along the ridge, they see this young girl walking. And it's a chilly night, so they pick her up and they drive her to a farmhouse that she says is her home, where she gets out. And because it's cold, the boy or boys had loaned her a jacket. Well, when she got out and went in the house, she had the jacket on, and the boys didn't notice it. They drove off, and it wasn't until they'd gotten down the road a few miles that they remembered that the young girl had their coat. So at that point, they turn around and they go back to the house where they let her off. and they get out and they go and they knock on the door, and a man and a woman come to the door, and the boys say, tell her what happened and that they wanted to pick up the jacket that they'd loaned their daughter. And the two people in the house, the man and the woman, get very upset. They say, oh, you boys, you are being very cruel, because it was a year ago today that our daughter was killed in an accident. And so this was really cruel of you to come over here and say that you saw our daughter and all this, because she's been dead for over a year now. So you better, you boys, just leave, you know, because they were very upset, of course. So at that point, the boys get back in their car or their buggy and drive off again, but they can't figure out what's going on. And as they come along, they go past the cemetery. They see like a light in the cemetery, and when they get close to the cemetery, they see a tombstone with their jacket hanging on it, and it is the tombstone of this young girl that they gave the ride. Now, some stories say that the girl was wearing a lavender dress, and that was why she's called Lavender Lily. And some stories say it was a prom dress. I think here's this girl walking along a road at night in a prom dress, whatever. But for some reason, this particular monument here in the Catholic cemetery is shown on the internet with a jacket hanging on it. And I don't know why they picked this one out. So that is the basic story. And there are all kinds of variations on it. And as I said, there's this basic story is all over the United States. So we're here now in the Catholic cemetery. So we're going to get back in the car and we're going to drive down Montana Ridge, and we're going to go to what was the German Methodist cemetery. Here we are at the stop sign, and we are going to go to the right. Oh, and there was something really interesting that I did find out about Montana Ridge when I was doing all this Googling. And do you know that this ridge, Montana Ridge, is the highest point in Buffalo County?
Oh, is it?
According to this, the guy, actually there wasn't much information about the cemeteries or anything on this particular website. So I think the guy was interested in geology or something. But he had all these elevation maps, and it showed that, yes, this was the highest point in Buffalo County, which is, you know, saying something. There's a lot of really tall hills and big bluffs in this county.
Yes, there is.
Yes. And it's beautiful. It's just a, you know, it's a beautiful county, just like Trempealeau County, but it does have its own personality.
And I think that's because they're so much closer to the river.
That could be.
Than we are.
And
you know?
yeah, and
it is 100% in the driftless area, and that's where the whole bluff thing comes in.
And I always thought about Buffalo County is there's no easy way to get to anything in Buffalo County. Like if you want to go down to Elma, there's, you know, you don't have a lot of easy choices to get there.
There is no straight road in Buffalo County.
No, there certainly isn't. But that makes it fine if you want to be out, you know, cruising around. It's a good place to cruise if you like doing corners.
Especially doing Sunday slow drives.
Yes, yes. Maybe people don't do those anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's gone out of fashion, but it'd be nice if it came back in.
Yes, it would be.
Yeah. When my in-laws would visit from Illinois, we would take cruises so we could go around and look at the crops. You know, my father-in-law loved to look at the crops and everything. So, all right, now we are here where we have to make a decision. Now, if we went to the right, we would go down into Wamondy. And we're going to the left, and we are on Montana Ridge. Now, there is like, they keep talking about upper and lower Montana Ridge, but one source would call the cemetery down here, the Methodist one, lower Montana Ridge, and another site would say, no, that was upper Montana Ridge. So they can't even agree on that. But we're going along the road here, And there's some more that goes to this story about Lavender Lily that pertains to just this area. Supposedly, the house where Lavender Lily was taken to by the boy or boys existed back there behind us on Tyson Ridge. And for a while, this house was owned by the Marsalics, and then later by Mike Shishik. And sometime in the 1980s, the house on this old place, and nobody was living in it, was burning. And so the fire department came up, I think from Independence, and they got the fire out, but they said they thought it had been caused by some kids who'd been in there, and they said there was like writing on the wall and blood on the walls, and they thought, well, maybe it's some kind of a satanic thing. Who knows? But anyway, they got the fire out. Well, a couple of weeks later, the house caught on fire again. Only this time, the owner, Mr. Shishik, said, just let it burn. And they did, and that was the end of it. But supposedly, this house had been owned by a Schneider family, although somebody that had really done some research on this whole thing said they could not find anything that said a Schneider family had ever owned this particular house. And also, one of the members of the Marsalic family that had lived in this house said that they had heard the legend of Lavender Lily, but they thought that the house that she lived in was actually down in Wamandee. So you see, it's really hard to pin anything down on this legend.
Did you find any information? Were there any lilies down in the Wamandee Valley?
Good question. That could be, because they said that the guy that had done some research said that he could not find any lilies at the German Catholic cemetery or here at this one that is the German Methodist. At least I'm told that this is the German Methodist cemetery. The people that are buried here are definitely, you know, they were German, because the writing on the tombstones is in German. But it said that this cemetery was run independently, that it wasn't necessarily run by the Methodist Church down in Wamandee Valley. So who knows? Like I say, there is all this conflicting information. So we'll stop here anyway and look at some of these stones. This is a small cemetery, but this is the one that was also German, but with the German Protestants. So supposedly Lavender Lily was walking on this road and was picked up by these boys somewhere around this time of year, in October, around Halloween. But again, like I say, there is so much conflicting stories about it. But the basic story is the girl that was walking and got picked up and was loaned a jacket, and the jacket eventually wound up hanging on her tombstone. But we don't know which cemetery. And there aren't any stones around here in either cemetery that are for a lily or a Lillian. But again, one source said, well, the stones were vandalized, that her stone had been vandalized and people had taken it off and run off with it. So again, who knows? But let's look around a little bit. This is a small, well-kept little cemetery. And the writing on these tombstones is in German. So these were where the German Protestants were buried. And I had the observation too that a lot of these people, when I looked online, had actually come from a part of Germany that is quite hilly, and maybe they felt more at home when they moved in here. But you can see some of the German names: Adank and Schorban, Charlot, Poppy, Dorn, and a lot of the writing on the stones is in German. So who knows if there was a lily here or not. But I know that there have been a lot of young people in this county that have gone out looking for lavender lily. In fact, one of my sons said that he did when he was in high school with he and his friends. And I don't think they ever found her, but it must have been fun looking anyway. So this is kind of a story about lavender lily that seems to be centered right around the Independence, Travis Valley, Wamedy, Montana Ridge. This is a big, long ridge. The road goes on a long ways, and there really aren't a lot of farms up here. I think before there were probably lots more than there are now. There are some new houses that have been built up here, I notice, but for a long time it seemed like my husband and I had bee colonies on either end of the ridge, and there was just a long way in between where there wasn't anybody living. And I always thought too, it must have been for these people when they came from Germany. In Germany, and I'm sure probably lots of other countries in Europe, if you were born to a farming family, that's probably what you were going to be doing in your life. You were going to be doing something that had to do with farming. And of course, it was usually the eldest son that inherited. So if it was a big family with 8 or 9 kids, that meant like a bunch of them had to find something else to do. And younger sons usually had to take positions that were not as well paying. They usually had to work as hired men. But then and women too. I mean, the daughters, if they didn't marry well or if they didn't marry at all, they could maybe spend their life as a geese girl, you know, taking care of somebody's geese. But then they got over here in the United States, and it wasn't like that anymore. You had options. If you weren't interested in farming, if you weren't the oldest son, that was okay. You know, you could go and do something else. So it must have been kind of liberating for some of the young people. Again, when we look at these stones, there's a lot of stones for children and babies. Really a hard life. It's hard to imagine losing children. Multiple children.
Year after year.
Yeah,
some of them
there's
teens.
Elsie that lived about, 6 days. And here's Mutter and Vater. Some of the names back here are Grotjan and Hartsfeld. Here's one for little Otto that lived to be 4 years old. It must have been really hard to be a parent back then, because you probably always had the notion that you might be losing one of your children, or maybe more. Lots of times to simple things like maybe an infection that nowadays could be cured very easily, especially with some kind of antibiotic, but back then that just meant death. But we have not found any stones here for a lily. But according to some people that have studied this legend, that's because her stone was dragged off, taken somewhere else. So I'm hoping that people that are watching this and know something, maybe they've heard some versions of this legend, it'd be nice to have it discussed or let us know. It's interesting, and it's kind of creepy, you know, when I tell people, it's like, whoo, that's scary, you know, especially the part where they go by the cemetery and the jacket is hanging on the tombstone. Yeah, that is kind of scary. Well, here's some more graves of young people. There was Linda that lived for a year, and Melvin that lived to be 6 years old. And of of course, there are people here that had long lives, you know, that really lived a long time. But there's also a depressing number of children, young people, babies. And it's the same way over there at the Catholic cemetery. So many graves there for young people and children.
Slushy rain. Okay, I got a nice shot of that. Okay, so they're on the other side of the ridge. They're hauling manure, and well, few loads left to haul out, and it starts to snow. And so they went. This is recording, by the way.
Okay.
So they went and finished up. Well, by the time they were done and got back up, of course, it snows less in the valley than it does on top of the ridge. Right?
Yeah.
When the snows come. Well, he made this corner here down in the Liga Valley, and that manure truck started sliding sideways.
Oh gosh.
And he said it was like in slow motion. He slid till this point in the road right here, and the back tire caught on that water drainage structure.
Oh, jeez.
And then he was able to gain control and go the rest of the way down into Liga Valley.
Oh boy.
But that was the first time with a manure tanker truck on snow going downhill. Kind of gliding in style.
Yeah. Life in Wisconsin. So now we are going down into Liga Valley. Nice road. It's all paved and everything. Coming down off of Montana Ridge, and no, we did not see Lavender Lily, did we?
No, we did not.
So Mary, I want to know, as your younger days in Independence, did you go looking for Lavender Lily?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there was multiple trips. Of course, that was a standard joke, you know. I shouldn't say a joke, but something this time of the year that as a youngster that my dad would tell stories about. And so we'd always have to take a drive at night, and we would just, you know, drive across the ridge. And usually before we went up there, we stopped at the Traverse Valley Bar, and we'd get ice cream.
All right.
So we would have ice cream, and we'd go look for Lavender Lily. And then sometimes we would take Silver Fox Ridge back, and then we would have to look for the ghost of Silver Fox.
And who's that?
I don't even know. I don't even know. I spent the bulk of my life wondering, were they actually looking for like a silver fox, you know, like the fuzzy animal?
Yeah.
Or was there a person whose name was Silver from the Fox family that something had happened to? But apparently there's some type of entity up on Silver Fox Ridge as well.
Well, that's a new one. I haven't heard of that.
Well, Nancy, you're going to have to let your fingers do the walking.
I guess so. Find out anything else.
To see if there's another rural legend in the area about the Silver Fox.
Because that's one I have not heard. And I've always wondered why it was called Silver Fox Ridge.
Well,
maybe there were silver foxes running around up there.
That sounds to me like maybe another History Files
yeah,
show.
Could be. So do you know anybody that lives here in Liga Valley?
There was Wiccas here, and I think there's Mesec.
Yes. They're back in there in Philo Road.
Yes. So, and I think there's a Pica or Pica. Some people say Pica. Most people in this area say Pica. The Picas seem to be over in the Northfield area. It's spelled the same.
Okay.
like Coop and Cop and
Yeah.
Prunjinsky and Prunjinsky.
Yep. I keep everybody straight. Shabilla and Prisbilla.
Yep. We got a lot of those common names. Anderson's pretty boring though.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. That one doesn't get mixed up too much or modified.
Yeah, Berkman's kind of hard to mess up too, isn't
Yeah, yep. I'm afraid so. Pretty boring name.
it? This is a pretty long valley though too, isn't it?
It is. All these little valleys and things, trunks that run off from Traverse Valley.
And off the ridge, Montana Ridge. This is some highly productive agriculture land back in here.
Yeah, it is. Look at it. It's beautiful fields. And everybody's getting that corn and soybeans off. I'm afraid that our beautiful fall weather is going to leave us. But it is getting to be that time of year, and by the time this program actually gets on to TCC TV, it's probably going to be like Halloween, the end of the month.
And then it'll be November.
Yeah, whoopee. So I hope that people that have watched this program enjoy it, and I hope maybe it encourages them to go out and take a drive, look around. It's beautiful countryside, whether it's fall or winter or spring. And it'd also be interesting to know if there are other variations on the Lavender Lily story that I did not find out about. But it does seem to be that basic story about the girl walking and gets picked up and gets a coat, and anyway the coat winds up on her tombstone, and because she's dead. It's a ghost story.
Well, it would be interesting because there are other small cemeteries around here. There's a couple of private cemeteries that maybe that's where she's at.
It could be. Like I say, the fella that had done some research on this legend, who probably had the most information about it, and I've run his story on the website, and at the end of this program I'll run some information. He said that people had told him that this Lavender Lily was a member of the Schneider family, but he could not find, by going back through the old census records and things, he could not find a Lily that was a member of any Schneider family. So, and like I said, another family that had lived up there said yes, they had heard this story, but they thought that Lily actually lived down in Wamandy and that she was buried down there. So again, we just don't have any definitive answers here, I'm afraid. It's a country legend.
Should I stop?
Well, let's see, we're getting back down here, and I think we'll be crossing back. Are we crossing back into Trempealeau County here?
I think we are already in Trempealeau County.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that was exciting.
We snuck back in.
We snuck into Buffalo County, and now we're sneaking back out again.
That was probably one of the manure tanker trucks. that
Probably.
Jacob slid off the ridge with.
Probably was. And we're going back down Traverse Valley, whatever. I don't think it's worth getting into a fist fight over what it should be called. Either way seems to work just fine. People know what you're talking about.
And technically, it's what? County Road X? Double X?
X. This is X, yeah. It goes up and over and goes down into Wamandy.
Where it becomes C and something else, doesn't it? Or is it X all the way
Well, I think it stays X and it gets down there, but then there is C and double C, and yeah, if you go driving there, it's real easy to get real turned around. At least I certainly have. Well, I think we're going to wrap up our Halloween special here, Mary. Oh,
Happy Halloween
happy Halloween
from
the History Files.